It's time to start asking the question on this episode of Pushback.
Go, 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 Jonny, go, 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 Jonny, go, 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 Jonny, go, go.
If you're concerned about the direction our culture is heading, then maybe it's time to push back.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pushback. I'm Dr. Jonny, and I'm coming to you again this week with my most passionate topic, period. This is what I care the most about here on this face of the earth from a cultural standpoint, and the thing that I would be willing to die for, I would be willing to fight for. Everybody has kind of that small list of things. Like, what is that list of things that you'd be willing to lay your life down for? This is one of those topics. And when I have covered this before so many times, I've never covered it really from that political perspective, because that's the season that we're in here on this podcast, is talking about how politics affects our children and how policy and politics and the spirit of that political spirit can actually affect our children, and even go so far as to say killing our children. Well, there is no greater example of that than what this topic is about. Let me just review what I consider to be the political spirit, at least the political spirit that I see is alive and well today in this world. And it really is about power and control. Now, politics has always been about power. That's not a new concept. Nor is control. In fact, I would say power and control goes back to the Garden of Eden. That's what Satan tempted them with, that you would be like God, that you would be the masters of your own destiny, and all you need is the knowledge of good and evil. You need to have your eyes open and enlightened to the things of this world in a greater and more magnificent way. All it will cost you is sin. And the result of the rest of human history and American history is the result of how humans react with God, interact with God, and the way that sin keeps us from his heart and his perfect plan for us. So there is a political spirit that has been present, I believe, from the beginning of time. And so the notion that we as a country are fighting this political spirit is not a new battleground, not even remotely. However, we as ambassadors of Christ, if we can get the picture that we are actually empowered and given life here on this earth to actually impact the purposes and plans of God here on this earth, if we can get the notion that we are here for an incredible reason to represent heaven here on earth, then I believe that we can inject ourselves into all aspects of society, including politics. Bum, bum, bum. Yes, including politics. We can inject our lives even into politics to bring real change that affect not only us and the way we live and the culture and his ways, but our children. And generationally thinking. I believe that's possible. And I believe that's why we are here. Well, I believe that there is no greater threat to our culture. There's no greater resistance to the culture of heaven than a country that allows abortion. Mother Teresa said that. She said, any country that accepts abortion is not teaching its people to love, but to use violence to get what they want. Wow. That just wrecks me. It's so true. It's so profound. It's so real. And we as a country have permitted, have given room for, and have even enshrined into law the quote-unquote right to have an abortion. And when Roe v. Wade was overturned, I shared on this podcast that was a great day of celebration, one that I never thought I would actually see in my lifetime, and how things had shifted. But I also said that it was a beginning and not the end. And boy, have we seen that. over the last several years, actually over the last several political cycles. And as sad as it is, and I just want to give you a little bit of what I think is the current political temperature on abortion, as sad as it is, the far left actually see this as a winning argument for them, the protection of quote unquote women's rights, women's reproductive rights, as they call it, which just makes me scratch my head. And Republicans, or I should say the right, have unfortunately compromised. Now, I want to say unfortunately because I wish it was different, even though I understand the position. Candidate Trump recently came out with his position on abortion, which he's hoping is a quote unquote winning position. And that's to just bring it back to the states and have the states decide. Now, that's been his position. Now, he reports that there's going to be a wide range of responses by the states to what that means. And he even admits that that's going to be hard to swallow for many of the pro-life supporters. But he feels like that he needs to win. He needs to have political victory in order to implement real change. And I hesitantly agree with him. As it stands right now in the current political environment that the conservative side is in, there is an acknowledgement that more than 50% tend to support abortion or would vote in that direction. And so the response then is you have the chance or the choice to promote abortion or to restrict abortion. And I think that's an important distinction to make. Now, I am the most ardent pro-life person that there could be. I can't be any stronger. I also understand that there's a political realm and a political environment. And I do need to vote, and there needs to be a place of victory so to make progress. So restricting abortion is not a win, but it's progress. Anytime you can restrict the weeks or the allowances of abortions, more lives are saved. And so we have to, in the environment that we're in, get as much victory as we possibly can with the hope of a finish line of a country that rejects the notion of abortion. Hopefully I articulated that well. I was thinking today, I just want you to close your eyes and envision yourself living in 1850, and you are now a political entity, you're a senator, you're in the House of Representatives, and a bill comes before you that says, I would like to restrict slavery. And instead of all Africans or Black people can be enslaved, we're going to restrict it to only men over the age of 18 can be enslaved, no women, no children, and families would not be separated. Would you sign that bill? See, this is the problem. You're signing on a bill that allowed slavery, but you'd also be signing a bill that would restrict it, that would save lives and save some family environment. This is tricky. This is politics. And there's no right or wrong answer to that question, but I want you to envision that. And so this is the situation that we're in right now. Would you just simply take a stance of no abortion and have the far left then take office? Or would you be willing to take some restriction, some middle of the road restriction to save some lives and to make the situation better, with the hope that, and which happened in our country, that eventually the people of America would reject abortion completely? This is where we're at. This is politics. I'm putting this in one basket over here, while also understanding that there needs to be an awareness, an awakening of the American heart and psyche towards what abortion is, so that we as a people and in our hearts reject the notion of what it is. So how do we do that? Well, it's interesting because, again, talking purely from a political standpoint, we tend to remove the moralistic conversation of what abortion is, and we would just simply try to garner votes. it's so frustrating. I can't even tell you how frustrated and angry I get about this, because it's rejecting actually what's best for people, and certainly what's best for a child in a womb who's being killed and murdered, and replacing it with the notion of staying in power and control. See, let's break this down to really simple terms. Women vote, unborn children do not. So we are going to protect the rights and the principles and the liberties of women who vote, and we're going to reject the right to life of an unborn who can't. This is the political environment, and the conversation stays in that vein because they're speaking to the people whose liberties are feeling like they're being jeopardized. Not speaking to the unborn child in the womb. They can't respond or hear or cast a vote. It's super sad. It breaks my heart. And this is why I'm so passionate about this. So it means that those who are defenseless, those who don't have a voice, need to have somebody, some people that stand up and become that voice. So why is this not being discussed? Well, it's being discussed simply at a level of human liberty, and not being discussed at the level of human life, which I've said over and over again is the only question to ask. This podcast is entitled Asking the Question. There's only one question. And it's interesting because I'm noticing, even as I'm doing my research for this podcast and others, that there is an amazing lack of anybody on the record telling us, when does life begin? That's the question. When does life begin? And so I do a Google search, famous politicians who are on the record for when does life begin. There aren't any. There's not any. There's some who say that life began at fertilization and conception. There's many that say that, but there's not very many people that actually assign a week to it. W-E-E-K. Assign a week to when does life begin. Those who are in support of abortion seem to be reticent to actually tell us when life begins. I believe that even in this political cycle, it's incredible to me how the left refuses to answer the question of whether you would put restriction on abortion at all. They're asked this question over and over again, and we get political speak over the top of it. Well, it's between the mother and her doctor. So if the doctor is comfortable performing an abortion after the child is born at the birth canal, then you're okay with that. That's what they're saying. They are answering the question, just not giving it an exact, obvious answer. Again, Mother Teresa was on the record over and over and over again. She said, "Please give me the child. I am willing to accept any child that would be aborted." She says abortion has become the greatest threat to world peace. See, my friends, this is not a small topic. She has and had perspective on what this means. And she was able to boil it down. She was able to, even though she lived in these places of poverty, even though she reached out to the hurting people, the adult hurting people, the people on this planet, she saw that this unborn child and the willingness of the human mind to conceptualize and then follow through on killing this baby, child sacrifice, as the greatest threat to world peace. And that's the way I see it. I'm with her 100%. That's what this podcast is about, is to open our eyes to what is happening in this world, the conversations and the lack of conversations, the lack of the appropriate and right conversations that we are having about the most important things on the planet. And I believe that this is the greatest civil liberty topic of our lifetime. And I equate it absolutely to the Holocaust and to slavery and to all of those times when certain people in power arbitrarily decided that somebody else was less than human, and justified violence then to exterminate them. I'm floored when they asked then candidate Barack Obama when he thought life began. And his response was, It's above my pay grade. My friends, that's an admission to allowing murder under his watch of American citizens, because he is admitting to the fact that he is unsure of when life begins. And if that life is a human citizen, as many of us believe that they are, then he is condoning murder. It's just that simple. I want to tell it as straightforward as I possibly can, with as much passion as I possibly can. That is can I say this on this podcast? That's a wussy answer. It's so weak that he refuses, that he would support abortion and yet refuse to answer on behalf of an obvious American citizen. That just floors me. I can't even get my mind around it. I would respect it more if he said 15 weeks, if he just had an answer, or at the birth canal. I would respect it more because it would make sense more, but we're not having the right conversation. And they're very comfortable just sitting in that position of defending the voters that vote for them, but not actually taking a position on the actual moralistic value of what we are actually talking about here. So this is part of my role here on this earth, is to ring this bell as long as I can ring this bell in the strongest way that I can. And let me just read this excerpt, because I think this, if I can at least just bring this to your attention, I believe that it would raise some eyebrows. This was, I go back and put my science hat on again, my medical hat, and bring this to you with a great amount of humility that says that we need to be having the right conversation. And how is it possible that this is not being discussed? This is from a peer-reviewed journal in the biological and life sciences literature, have published articles that represent the biological view that a human's life begins at fertilization, called the fertilization view. As those statements are typically offered without explanation or citation, the fertilization view seems to be uncontested by the editors, reviewers, and authors who contribute to scientific journals. However, Americans are split on whether the fertilization view is a philosophical or religious belief, 45%, or a biological and scientific fact, about 46%. And only 38% of Americans view fertilization as the starting point of a human life. In the two studies that explored experts' views on the matter, the fertilization view was the most popular perspective held by public health and IVF professionals. Since a recent study suggested that 80% of Americans view biologists as the group most qualified to determine when a human's life begins, experts in biology were surveyed to provide a new perspective to the literature on experts' views on this matter. Biologists from 1,058 academic institutions around the world, over 1,000 institutions around the world, assessed survey items on when a human's life begins. And overall, listen to this, please, 96% affirmed the fertilization view. My friends, this was not a Christian review, only Christian colleges. This was over 1,000 institutions and 5,577 scientists. And of them, 5,337, 96% affirmed the fertilization view. The founding principles of the field of science communication suggest that scientists have an ethical and professional obligation to inform Americans, as well as people around the world, about scientific developments so members of the public can be empowered to make life decisions that are consistent with the best information available. Given that perspective, and a recent study finding that a majority of Americans believe they deserve to know when a human's life begins in order to make an informed reproductive decisions, science communicators should work to increase the level of science awareness on the fertilization view, as it stands alone as the leading biological perspective on when a human life begins. I'm floored. 96%. I happened to be one of them. Embryology was my favorite class in medical school by far. It fascinated, it blew me away. It spoke to the craftiness of the Lord's hand. I just couldn't even fathom the intricacy and the way this child developed. I'm just one of these 96%. That's a huge number. Why is this not being discussed? Why are we being the ones being accused of being science deniers? The ones who say that a woman has a right to abort a child, a human life. This is what we're talking about. Scientists would 96% of them would agree that this is taking a life. So when does a child become protected under the law as a citizen? Well, according to the scientific community, overwhelmingly at fertilization. According to the religious community, overwhelmingly at fertilization. See, these are not just political talking points. This is a life and death conversation, and we need to be informed. I would like to be one of those people that inform you so that you are armed with the facts to make the appropriate decision. I'm speaking to those of you that may be pro-choice. You need to be armed with what abortion is. You need to be armed when life begins. You need to be accountable for, are you willing to stand in that place of judge and jury on a human life and take that life and delve into the realm of murder? Are you willing to go there to protect human liberty? This is what we're talking about, and this is the conversation. This is the question to ask. When do you think a human life begins? When do you think that this child is protected as a citizen? And don't let them fumble and bumble and say it's about a doctor and the woman's choice. No, there's a real answer to this. And there needs to be a real answer to this. And they need to be able to defend why they believe it. If they say 19 weeks, then why 19 weeks? And why at 18 weeks and 6 days is this not a human? And at 19 weeks and 1 day, this is a human. Why do you believe that? And we need to start asking the question, when does life begin? I want to touch on this a little bit further as we go forward, because I feel so, I want to say enraged by this conversation, so moved. See, every fight for freedom of life actually resulted in a war. But I know of one really important exception, and that was William Wilberforce in England. And if you've never heard my series called May the Force Be With You, I encourage you to go back and find the archives of these podcasts and listen to those, because he was a man who was a politician. He was a man who in his lifetime changed the hearts of the people. Because that's what this is about. This isn't going to be about who we elect. This isn't going to be about politicians making sweeping change. This is about the hearts of the people, where we can even have abortion be legal, but it will be unacceptable and rejected. Where the abortion providers simply dry up because of the lack of demand. That's my vision. That's my heart. And I believe it's possible. William Wilberforce did it, and I believe that we can do it here on this earth. Will you join me? Please join me. We have to be vigilant. We have to be knowledgeable. We have to connect to the data. We have to connect to the hearts of people, because it's going to change. There isn't a clear line like a north versus a south. There isn't a clear line like the Allies versus the Axis. This isn't a clear place where a war can be fought with weapons. The war is in our hearts and in our minds. And I believe that the silent humans who are unable to fight for themselves need champions. I choose to be one of those champions, and I ask you to join me in the fight. It's a place to start. It's a place to begin. So let's go together now to set and shape the culture.